10.
Your financial advisor is really there to counsel you, to listen to your concerns, and essentially guide you on the right path being your path, not someone else's, yours. Now, the advisor should work with you, and ultimately they're adding value throughout the course of your relationships. And it's important when you're meeting with an advisor, or maybe you're working with one right now, to make sure they sit with you, meet you where you are. I call it the ages and stages, right? The season of life that you're in, and also over time, help you put out the noise, right? Making sure that the noise you're bringing in, whatever it is in the news, the media, colleagues, friends, family, right? Making sure it's relative to your plans with your portfolio, and that they, the advisor, are looking at that for you. They're redesigning the portfolio based on current market events, maybe finding opportunities or giving you behavioral coaching to make sure you stay on the path and don't deviate with what your set out goals are. That's important, but making sure that you don't lose sight of the overall goal, which is for many out there listening and watching to us right now, is to grow your wealth over time.
9.
And here's what I want to bring up. When you're looking at a stock or an investment, the number of buyers equals your demand. Someone wanting to buy that stock or that investment, right? That's your demand. The number of people willing to sell is your supply. So when the number of buyers, your demand, are greater than the number of sellers willing to sell your supply, the stock price rises, all right? Now, so you think demand is greater than supply. It's in demand, as they say. That equals a stock price or an investment rising. Now, when the number of shareholders or sellers willing to sell your supply are greater than the number of buyers or your demand, the stock price falls. So again, the supply now in this scenario is greater than the demand, the stock price falls.
8.
My perspective would be that the annuity payment would pay you more over time because you'll get paid out more, but you get paid out over 29 years instead of right away. You just look at the numbers here. Let's look at a lottery calculator. And I did some fun here, some fun math for us for a second. Let's break this down. If you actually go to omnicalculator.com, I have no relation to them at all, but you can actually input almost any dollar amount into the fields and it will give you an idea of the lump sum payout or the annuity payout and the difference between the two. So if you look at the screen here for a second, what I put in there was $1 billion. I just rounded it out to $1 billion, right? I put filing status single. Again, I don't know whether this person's married or single. You can, play around with this if you'd like to. And it also asks the state in which you live. I put California because that's where this lottery was won. Now you scroll down, you can actually see the lump sum payout versus the annuity. Here's my example, right? The lump sum payout, if $1 billion was there and you were a single filer in the state of California, your lump sum payout would be $520 million. Now, right to the right of that, you see the annuity payment, the payout, being at $1 billion. The difference being $480 million. Again, the annuity payment will be paid out over 29 years and the lump sum payout will be paid out right away, $520. And I want to bring this back up for a second because what I think is more important to understand here is play back the historic analogy. Let's have some fun. Let's get back into our daydreaming mode right now. Wherever you're watching or listening, right? Let's just think about this for a second. If you were to win this by simply going with some friends, maybe jokingly buying a ticket, maybe you're strategizing and playing it some way you think there's some strategy around it. Either way, you won this. That's why they call it a winning. You didn't earn this. I hate to break it to you. It's okay to admit you didn't earn it. You didn't spend 30 years building something. You didn't slave day in and day out to, manage your finances and live within your means and save and invest and take risks and things like that. No, this was just a lottery winning.
7.
Dollar cost averaging at its bare bones is, the point of it is to average out the prices at which you buy into the market. So again, if you are consistently contributing to maybe a retirement plan or hopefully contributing to investment accounts of, you think about just the last 10 years, right? You've been buying, technically, if you look at it, at higher and higher prices. But if you stop contributing now, that means you really get nowhere. The opportunity to buy at lower prices right now is really where it's at. That's the ability to smooth out your investing and ultimately bringing the average cost of the investing down, leaving you with more returns to keep in your pocket.
6.
The idea of a mortgage burning party might sound fun, and really the idea of not sending out a huge chunk of cash each month might actually even sound better. Here's what I want to share today. It might be a little controversial, so let this thing sink in, all right? Paying off one's mortgage might not make the most financial sense. It really comes down to two main factors: cost and expected return. Your cost is your interest rate, right? The expected return, essentially, if the capital is invested, is the growth of money. Those are your two factors. So let me give you an example. If a mortgage right now, we're sitting here in mid-2023, if it's a year old for many of us out there watching and listening, the interest rate is likely around, let's call it 3%. If an investment hypothetically is paying 5%, holding off on paying the mortgage is probably the prudent move. Why? Interest rate arbitrage. Sounds pretty fancy, right? Let me give you an example. Say hard work or good fortune has you holding $200,000 in cash right now, and your mortgage stands at $100,000. Paying off the debt and investing the remaining 100. So basically, right, you take the 100 from the 200, pay off the debt, and you're investing the 100,000, right? You have left, you would earn $5,000 on a 5% hypothetical rate of return. That's a net capital of $105,000 at the end of the year. Now, if you were to invest the full $200,000, essentially not paying off the $100,000 mortgage, the net capital at year's end would amount to $107,000. Now, here's the math of how it works. $200,000 earning 5% less the $100,000 debt and the $3,000 interest payment hypothetically on that debt. You can see here, it might make sense to hold the debt. Here's the takeaway. As long as growth is greater than cost, having debt is a sound decision. Remember that when you look at your finances. If you're investing, right, you can refer back to some of the episodes I spoke about right around should I invest or pay off debt first. Understand, this may not be the nicest way to say it, but debt is typically a symptom of an underlying disease.
5,
If we can curtail the spending, the overspending, we're not going to have too much of a deficit issue. And if you can imagine for a second, no matter what side you're on here, you got two screens in front of you, right? One is, C-SPAN and you're watching the budget deficit conversation and your blood's boiling or you're thinking about it. And then on the other screen, maybe you have your brokerage account up, right? Remember, they don't necessarily directly correlate. And I think I need to share that with everybody because I think sometimes, whether it's C-SPAN or CNN or Fox or whatever news outlet, and no knock to any one of those, right? But we directly relate it to now our brokerage statement on a custodial or an advisor side. And yes, there's a lot that interplays there, but it's not exactly directly correlated. So on the one hand, I'm talking about some of the items that I want to see happen with this deficit conversation, let alone the debt ceiling being raised. But the fact of the matter is, I love it because it's shedding light, I think, hopefully, on the overspending. By the way, you and I, again, would do this for our own household, right? So a lot of times we can relate the deficit to how we would manage our own household. And that's the problem I've always had about typical government officials, is simply because if you haven't had a private sector job or you're just so far removed from it, you have no idea that when you say you want to spend something and you really have no idea, how you're going to pay for that, that's a big problem.
4,
Payment history and the amount you owe are probably the most significant factors in calculating your credit score by and large. So you're thinking, okay, if I have a credit score, what is the benefit of having a high credit score? Well, having a high credit score has several benefits, right? Including lower interest rates on loans that you do take out, ultimately easier approval for other applications for loans, maybe even for a rental, for example. So over time, obviously having a higher credit score, it can save you thousands of dollars in interest payments if you are taking on debt. The primary benefit, I'll say, of a high credit score is getting more loans easier, I think, for many out there. But hear me when I say this. If you already overspend, then you probably don't or shouldn't have more loans. So be careful here and maybe refer back to my video on good debt versus bad debt, because it's important to make sure that although you might have a high credit score, doesn't mean you necessarily have to use it. And let me end with this. What I've seen in nearly 2 decades, I think, again, a lot of people focus what I'll say too much attention on credit scores. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying you're not talking about it right now with your family, but I think there's too much worry on a credit score because ultimately, does it matter? Is really the question. And I know how that might sound, but it comes down to a high credit score, yes, can have a positive impact on your financial well-being. However, you don't need to do anything special, if you think about it, to get a high score. Pay off credit card debts, don't overspend on things like cars or homes or credit cards, and you'll actually have a great score. So you don't have to do anything crazy to get there. And if you do get there, the likelihood of you needing to use your high credit score is actually much less.
3,
Now, for many of us, there are various types of investments that have various types of tax advantages that we know about. As do, by the way, various types of investment accounts that go along with those. And so incorrectly mixing the two can actually reduce your returns and really actually cost you money. Now, a quick example that I'll bring up here in a second, just to start, is municipal bonds. Let's just talk about that for a second, okay? Many of you have heard of these before. The income they generate is actually not taxed at most levels. So it makes really no sense to keep them, say, in a tax-deferred retirement account like an IRA or a 401k, because you're not paying taxes to begin with in those accounts. So there's no benefit from a tax deferral. Makes sense? So municipal bonds are actually best suited for traditional taxable accounts or brokerage accounts, as an example. So I want to go through a variety of things like that here on the show today, and really not just accounts, but investments that you may have or likely have. And you should check on this and make sure that they're in the right accounts, because as a financial advisor, this is what we do for our clients, right? Making sure that's not always talking about the specific investment or again, always what you own, but then again, how you own it.
2,
Like all of us, even as adults, we want to start and introduce a longer term objective, teaching them about savings versus, just having a checking account, or teaching them about the effect and the impact of things like compound interest, depending on the kid's age. Because ultimately, teaching our kids about investing and saving is really crucial for financial well-being and really their wealth building, both today and in the future.
1,
What do taxes have to do with investing or investments? A lot. I talk about tax planning as a financial advisor because it has everything to do with the success of your overall retirement plan. Being efficient with your distributions, your after-tax actual earnings, has a lot to do with taxes. So get this, there were about 312 mutual funds firms that reported in this database. 296 of those funds had tax distributions. That's over 10%. 38 of them had distributions over 20%, and 26 of them had distributions of their funds over 30%. What does that mean to you? Let's say you own a mutual fund right now, and this is what I want to call to action. If you own a mutual fund, talk about this in an after-tax account. If you own a mutual fund, and let's say you and I are the only investors in the world, you and I have different financial circumstances, right? Let's say I need a distribution because I need some cash to pay off some debt. All right, I have to go to the mutual fund company that you and I both own shares with and redeem those shares when I do that. They're going to sell shares, and they're doing it, and they're passing along any taxes that are implied in those sales off for me to you. Hey, I hope you enjoyed that today. If you did, make sure to subscribe to our show so you don't miss a single episode. And always remember to make your money matter.